is time. A couple of weeks ago, last week, we had the Secretary of Education come to the Higher Ed Committee, and we had a conversation about why MOHELA has not been fired. What we were told is that there is a process that is taking place, that there is about 1 million borrowers that have been taken off their roster. But it is time to take every single borrower off their roster. It is time to stop. It is time to stop their contract. It is time to fire them. It is time to listen to the borrowers that have been speaking up about the struggles that they are facing. And it is time for us to do the right thing. We are asking the administration to take this step forward because it is past time that we listen to the borrowers that have been suffering under the incompetence of MOHELA. So thank you all for having me, and I appreciate everyone for being here.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Congresswoman Presley. Congresswoman Presley has been a very good friend to the Debt Collective and has been, without a doubt, one of the strongest champions of higher education and canceling student debt over the past few years. So I'm going to introduce Congresswoman Presley.
Movement family, good to be with all of you. So many of the folks gathered here today have been at the forefront for years of our broad, diverse, and multi-generational movement to cancel student debt and to protect borrowers. I'm so proud to stand alongside each one of you and continuing to do this work, which is essential. I love that I'm following my sister here. She was bringing the fire. You know, there is, ire and outrage here because this is outrageous. It's a grave injustice, and this is supposed to be a lifeline. So now, I know many of you have heard the expression of like a dog with a bone. I'm certainly no dog, but I am a congresswoman with a cause. And I have never forgotten, I'm 5 years in Congress now, I've never forgotten the advice that I received at freshman orientation, which is, in the process of legislating and governing, it is very easy to forget the plot, but you should never forget the plot. And the plot is the people. And that's what brings us here today. For so many borrowers who live in my district, the Massachusetts 7th, whether it's a parent juggling part-time jobs or a third-grade teacher who spent a decade in the classroom making payments month to month, their financial situations remain precarious. It's why we have not let up in our advocacy. It's why we continue to work with the Biden-Harris administration to make good on the president's promise of broad-based student debt cancellation. It's why we have not let up, and it's why we push Secretary Cardona to implement their student debt rulemaking as efficiently and effectively as possible. And it's why we are now calling on the administration to do right by borrowers and to fire MOHELA. Any one of us could spend hours at this podium outlining the many ways in which MOHELA has failed our borrowers. And the stories we've heard from borrowers are truly heartbreaking. They are infuriating, and they have unfortunately become far too common. High wait times when you call, misleading information about repayment options, wrong billing amounts when they ask you for money. 4 in 10 MOHELA customers experienced a servicing failure during the student loan system's return to repayment. More than 800,000 borrowers became delinquent on their loans through no fault of their own because MOHELA failed to meet its most basic obligations. Shameful. These stories are not just statistics. They are lived experiences of our family members, of our friends, our neighbors. These are the teachers, the nurses, the firefighters, and young professionals who give back to our communities every day, who took on student loans with the hope of building a better future, only to find themselves crushed under the weight of insurmountable debt. And rather than taking responsibilities for its many failures, MOHELA has evaded accountability while recklessly expanding its portfolio of borrowers. Enough is enough. The Biden administration, they have a responsibility and an obligation to protect student borrowers and to truly hold MOHELA accountable. We can no longer stand by while MOHELA continues to exacerbate the student debt crisis, to worsen the hardship felt by borrowers, and undermine President Biden's efforts to deliver student debt relief the borrowers demand and deserve. There must be accountability. And that's why we applauded the administration for withholding and putting pay for MOHELA and other predatory loan servicers, cutting pay for MOHELA and other predatory loan servicers. We applauded the administration for moving over 1.5 million borrowers away from MOHELA and transferring them in-house or to other loan servicers. These actions were necessary, and it is time for the Department of Education to finally, enough is enough, terminate MOHELA's contract and put loan servicers on notice. We will not tolerate your negligence and exploitation. We will not let you profiteer off vulnerable student borrowers. And if you try to mislead borrowers out of the relief they demand and deserve, we will not let you get away with it.
That's right.
So we thank you all again for being here today. And I know that our sister in service had a conflict today, but I do want to acknowledge the leadership and the partnership of St. Louis's own Cori Bush. So we thank her for her support in holding these folks accountable. Again, to all of our advocates, to all the borrowers who have shared their stories, to my colleagues in good, thank you. Together we'll build a just America where student loans are not necessary. Where government truly works for the people and everyone can get ahead without being trapped in cycles of student debt.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Presley. Next, we'll hear from a leader who has been in the fight to cancel student debt since the very beginning. This is the president of the American Federation for Teachers, Randy Weingarten.
So you would think that once we solved Navient, it would have been enough.
Right.
You would think that once President Biden made a commitment not only to fix PSLF, it would have been the start.
Right.
You would think that once President Biden did the initial debt cancellation of $10,000 to $20,000, it would have been enough. But as our dear sister in the struggle, sisters have just said, it's never enough. We're fighting every single generation. And so I am honored to be here with this generation of people who want to be in college, who want to have that opportunity, and who are struggling with unbelievable student debt even after everything that the Biden administration and all of us have done. It's not fair and it's not right, and we are fighting back.
That's right.
And so I start there because, you know, as Congresswoman Presley and Omer have both said, as the student debt Mike Pierce has said, this has been a long struggle. Borrowers in the last generation have basically said, I want to go to college. I may be the first generation that goes to college.
Right.
Because college is not free, I need to get a student loan. And that student loan, first by Navient, first by Sallie Mae, sometimes by SoFi, they change themselves up in so many different ways that they are engaged in predatory practices. Yes. And so what did we do? With the Student Borrower Protection Center, with our legal colleagues, we sued Navient. We sued Betsy DeVos. We said enough is enough. And you need to be accountable to the teachers, the nurses, the young people who are claiming their future.
That's right. That's right.
And we beat Navient. And we beat Betsy DeVos. Woo! And we worked with the Biden administration to create a different way of getting public service loan forgiveness. And now over 1 million people have gotten the relief of public service loan forgiveness, and it is life-changing.
That's right, we did that.
We did that. Yeah. We did that. How many times have we been at this triangle? Because a couple of us are old. We did that. But we did that with all of you and with the people before you. So the bottom line is this. MOHELA comes in, they get the contracts, and what's the first thing they do? they sue the Biden administration to stop broad-based relief. Right. And then what's the second thing they do? They then have, talk about predatory, they then have all these borrowers and they have a call deflection scheme. Right. So when it is critical for people to be on the phone with someone, they can't get on the phone with someone. You see, 9 hours. Right. They can't get relief. So talk about predatory. Here they are stopping relief that has happened and then creating an infrastructure that makes profit over people. That's with right. This call deflection scheme. That's right. Now it's time to fire them. And when we have the audacity with the Student Borrower Protection Center, I would say the obligation, not the audacity, they then threaten to sue us because we put the facts out in the public. Any of us, if we had done 1% of what MOHELA does, we get fired. It's time to fire MOHELA.
Thank you so much, Randy. Next, we'll hear from our Texas Congressman, Representative Greg Cesar.
Thank you. Buenos dias. Good morning, everyone. First, let's hear it for the Debt Collective and the AFT and Congresswoman Presley and Congresswoman Omar and all of you who have been fighting this fight that people used to say was impossible or pie in the sky. And thanks to you, President Biden made those promises about broad-based student debt cancellation. We're going to fire MOHELA based on this power and this work. And I'm just so proud to be a part of this alongside you all. Let's be really clear about who it is we're fighting for. MOHELA is the loan servicer for our teachers and for our nurses and for our public defenders and for our firefighters, for everyday people that went out and said, I want to get an education. I'm going to play by the rules, do the extra hard work, get an education, and then spend some of my hard-earned money afterwards paying off this debt. And then what do they get in return? They get 9-hour wait times and purposeful call deflection schemes. They get predatory lending and predatory service of their lending. They get the runaround from MOHELA that gets our tax dollars, and then MOHELA uses some of those tax dollars to hire lawyers to block student debt cancellation and put people in more debt than they need. Boo! That isn't the way we respect our teachers and our public defenders and our public servants and our young people. That's not what we do. If we want to show respect to that community, to our constituents, then the answer is to fire MOHELA and complete the promise of complete student debt cancellation and college and community college for all people free of debt. And so that is the work that I know that we can do, just as the campaign from the Debt Collective and the Teachers Union and others brought to the center of American politics student debt cancellation. We're going to finish the job, and we're going to make sure that MOHELA and no one else that is so profit-driven like them gets in our way. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Representative Cesar. Next, we'll hear from a student loan borrower herself who has faced the Byzantine loop of call deflection and other types of consumer protection violations from MOHELA. Dr. Shamel Bell is a member of the Debt Collective. She is a mother and she is a lecturer at Harvard. Dr. Shamel Bell.
Hello, everyone. So I have my beautiful, brilliant 13-year-old here. He's been fighting with us, but he's off to the side. I don't see him right now. But I'll speak on behalf of myself and my 13-year-old. Greetings, everyone. First, I just want to thank you all for being here and being in this fight and this struggle with us. I am Dr. Shamel Bell, a mother, a Harvard lecturer, and a first-generation graduate with freedom dreams of thriving, not just surviving in this society, even coming from a low-income background. Today, I stand before you to share my deeply personal and troubling experience with MOHELA, the company responsible for mismanaging my public service loan forgiveness process. Okay, y'all, I pursued my PhD with a clear goal: to serve as a public servant, teaching as an act of service rather than for profit. The Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program promised loan forgiveness for these and for those of us committed to public service. Yet, my interactions with MOHELA have been nothing short of a nightmare. Countless phone calls with MOHELA went completely unanswered. I was one of those 4 or 5 hour calls, right? I had extremely long wait times. When I actually could manage to get them on the phone to answer my questions, I had paperwork mishandled, my time miscalculated. Overall, I was in a labyrinth of just false information, false promises, and failures that are not just administrative errors. There are systemic obstacles that jeopardize the financial stability and mental wellness of countless borrowers like myself. I firmly believe that education is a human right, not a privilege reserved for those with class advantage. It is criminal that any of us should even have student loan debt. When I bring up facts such as the lack of generational wealth of people of color like myself, or a direct consequence of systemic racism in the United States, I am highlighting a fundamental injustice. Education should not be contingent on merit as defined by class, but should be accessible to all. I'm going to run that back. When I bring up facts such as the lack of generational wealth that can pay for college for people of color, a direct consequence of systemic racism in the United States, I am highlighting a fundamental injustice. Education should not be contingent on merit as defined by class, but should be accessible for all. We live in a nation where phantom money appears to fund wars and bail out banks, yet we struggle to allocate resources for free education. Currently, taxpayers are not responsible for student loans. The federal government creates these loans as soon as students take them out. In the future, we can reallocate funds from excessive spending on prisons, wars, and corporate bailouts to ensure free education for all, as many other nations do. Unfortunately, come on. I'm bringing it home. Unfortunately, as a teacher, I am facing a moral dilemma in my mentoring and even as a parent to my 13-year-old brilliant son. I homeschool him, and we will ensure he completes as much higher education as possible during his high school years. But I cannot in good conscience argue that college is worth it as a Harvard lecturer. Especially if he has to take on debt. I am working hard, leveraging the class privilege that I now have as a PhD to make sure he can afford college. But what about the other children who are not as privileged as my son? Pursuing your dreams should not be a privilege. Should not be a privilege. My son and my mentees are why I'm speaking out against MOHELA, because I can no longer suggest to my students to pursue PhDs because public service loan forgiveness will save you. They will not save us from our debt. That should not even exist. MOHELA has consistently failed to provide accurate information about loans and options, providing basic information ineffectively, and implementing a complex call deflection scheme that I was a part of, and an endless loop, unable to get the help that we need. This is not just an inconvenience, it is a blatant disregard for borrower well-being. So finally, I ask you, why does the Department of Education continue to pay MOHELA millions to service student loans? The evidence of their failure is overwhelming. Their disregard for borrower well-being is blatant, and their expansion amid such failures is unacceptable. It is time for a change, for accountability, and for a system that genuinely supports those that is designed to help. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Dr. Bell. And next we'll hear from our first senator to join us out of Massachusetts, Senator Ed Markey.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here, organizers, debtors, young people, old people. We are with you against unjust student debt and incompetent loan services. This is an absolute disgrace, what has happened. Back in November, I wrote to MOHELA CEO Scott Giles with a simple message. MOHELA must get its house in order immediately, and I think everyone knows that MOHELA has failed in that job. They failed to deliver. Millions of borrowers, millions of young people have faced servicing errors by MOHELA and others since borrowers resumed loan payments in October of 2023. I wrote to them in November immediately to say this is not working, and they have billed people incorrect amounts. The people are facing delayed or denied access to repayments and forgiveness plans and received late billing notices. MOHELA should stand for Mismanagement and Offense in Higher Education Loan Authority. That's what MOHELA should stand for. And I know what servicing errors mean to borrowers and their families. And they are calling my office. I've heard from borrowers who spent hours on hold with MOHELA only to have their calls dropped, postponed buying homes and starting businesses because after fulfilling their 10-year commitment to public service, their loan discharge is postponed for months or years due to servicing delays. We're hassled by debt collectors for loans they've already paid off, and borrowers facing the anxiety of deciding between paying rent or paying loans only to find out that they were billed incorrectly. The only thing I haven't heard is a decent explanation for MOHELA's unacceptable behavior. There's an old saying, never attribute to malevolence what is merely due to incompetence. Well, MOHELA is both incompetent and malevolent in the way in which they have been handling the responsibility of young people's lives and their ability to plan for their future. It is time to fire MOHELA. So thank you all so much for everything that you are doing to make them accountable. MOHELA must go.
Thank you, Senator Markey. Next, we'll hear from Young Invincibles. We'll hear from Satra Taylor, who is the Director of Higher Education and Workforce Policy and Advocacy. Satra Taylor.
Good morning, everyone. Today is a great day to fire MOHELA. Can I get that? I first want to start by expressing my heartfelt gratitude to all of you who have made it here this morning. Some of you have traveled long distances, others have rearranged your schedules, and others have planned this press conference. Your efforts are truly commendable, and I am deeply grateful for your commitment. I also want to thank the members of Congress today for responding to their constituents who have called and pleaded for tangible solutions to fix this broken student loan system. Regardless of what naysayers may say, the student debt crisis is not, and I repeat, is not a problem of the people, but a problem of a broken student loan system that has disproportionately harmed communities of color. So again, thank you for answering the call. I also want to thank the advocates and change makers, the Debt Collective, the Student Bar Protection Center, and American Federation of Teachers for your sacrifice that the public eye may not always see. Still, partners surely do, and admire from afar the courage you embody to protect the people. And today is yet another example of your efforts of courage as we call on the Department of Education to terminate MOHELA's contract. My friends, it is quite simple. And there is no need to make it complex. As you heard from many of the members of Congress, enough is enough. It is time to fire MOHELA. And why has it become a norm for borrowers to wait hours for assistance when the Department of Education pays MOHELA millions to perform a quality service? When did it become standard for borrowers to receive misinformation or inaccurate billing? What more evidence do powers that be need beyond the MOHELA papers to believe what advocates and borrowers are telling them to be true about the current student debt disaster? I will repeat it. It is time to fire MOHELA. This country is at a pivotal time in history with clear indicators of right and wrong. We cannot afford not to name and call out injustices if we envision a more equitable future for future generations. MOHELA's current performance and refusal to hold themselves accountable for their contractual obligations are unacceptable, and we must call out the hypocrisy. The Department of Education has the authority and the evidence to show that millions of borrowers are at risk, and unfortunately, this action cannot wait any longer. The time has been up. And I'll say this for the last and final time. It is time to fire MOHELA.
That's right. Enough is enough.
Thank you, Satra. I think we have one more speaker. Our last speaker will be Thomas Goki. Thomas Goki is the Policy Director and Caseworker at the Debt Collective, the nation's first union of debtors. So now we'll hear from Thomas.
That was my call, 9 hours. So I'm going to start with a fact that I don't like. It's a fact that you probably don't like, but it's a fact that we all have to deal with. Joe Biden restarted our student loan payments. He didn't have to do that, but he did. And now he's going around claiming that he has fixed the student lending system. I think the technical term for that is malarkey. The truth is, the student loan system has never been more broken than it is now, and MOHELA is the primary reason. It is time for the Biden administration to hold MOHELA accountable by firing MOHELA. Now, the Biden administration has done some really excellent work ending surprise billing for medical bills. But MOHELA is still hitting people with surprise bills. They are not following the regulations that say you have to give people an adequate time between when you send them a bill and when you expect a payment. They're just saying, tomorrow we need $3,000. One of the things that President Biden is saying fixes the system is his new SAVE plan. Unfortunately, MOHELA is already breaking the SAVE plan. I have been on the phone with student borrowers with MOHELA, people who have direct federal student loans, and the MOHELA representative says, you don't qualify for the SAVE plan. That's just not true. About half of the information MOHELA gives over the phone just is false. MOHELA is miscalculating people's SAVE payments. People who should qualify for $0 monthly payments or only have a few $100s a month are being asked to pay several $1,000s erroneously. MOHELA told me my monthly payment would be $33 a month. I wish that was true. MOHELA, until recently, was the dedicated servicer for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, for school teachers, for firefighters, for social workers, for nurses. Yet MOHELA can't even get it right for their own employees. Because MOHELA is technically a nonprofit, every MOHELA employee with federal student loans qualifies for public service loan forgiveness. So we filed the Freedom of Information Act. How many MOHELA employees in the thousands of employees that have been around for decades have ever gotten public service loan forgiveness? The answer might be 0. It's fewer than 10. Only around 80 have a single qualifying payment for PSLF. If MOHELA can't get it right for their own employees, how are they going to get it right for school teachers, for nurses, for firefighters, for social workers? It is time to fire MOHELA. Since Biden restarted your payment, they have screwed up 40% of their accounts. If you're a student and you only answer 60% of the questions correctly on a test, you fail that test. Yet the Department of Education continues to funnel hundreds of millions of dollars to MOHELA. They get rewarded for failure. In fact, if you look at how their contract is structured, they get paid every time they improperly deny somebody for public service loan forgiveness, and then they get paid again to fix their mistakes. If you're paying them to make mistakes, surprise, surprise, they make a lot of mistakes. The most egregious thing that we've seen since payments were turned back on is that MOHELA is illegally accessing people's bank accounts and just helping themselves to payments. So it's possible to sign up for a direct debit and have your payment come out of your bank account automatically. But you have to sign up for it. And MOHELA is taking money from people who never signed up for it. And when you compound that with not accurately calculating the amount of the payment due, MOHELA in some cases has taken every single last penny in someone's bank account. So people can't make their rent, they can't fulfill a prescription, they can't put food on the table. And now MOHELA is in court claiming they have sovereign immunity, that they're the only student loan servicer that doesn't have to follow consumer protection laws. The Department of Education continues to pay them hundreds of millions of dollars on a multi-billion-dollar contract. I wish the Department of Education showed the same leniency when student debtors can't make a bill. When my coworker Astra Taylor defaulted on her student loans years ago because she couldn't come up with a monthly payment of a few $100s, the Department of Education hit her with a $10,000 penalty. The Department of Education will garnish your wages, they will take your tax refund, and then they will continue to fund MOHELA. I'm especially disappointed in the head of Federal Student Aid, Richard Cordray. Student loan debtors from around the country have flown out to meet with him personally to tell them about how MOHELA has financially ruined their lives with their servicer errors, and he's refused to meet with them this morning. We just found out that instead of meeting with student borrowers, he's going to be meeting with the head of MOHELA and their lobbyists. The Biden administration is forgiving MOHELA instead of canceling debt. He needs to hold MOHELA accountable by firing MOHELA. He needs to fire MOHELA and cancel the debt. And I'll end with this. Student debtors are constantly asking us, is it true that Biden is doing everything he possibly can to cancel our debt? I wish I could honestly say that he is, but he's not. The bare minimum that he can do is hold MOHELA accountable and fire MOHELA. So watch carefully what they do in the next few months. If they don't fire MOHELA, they're not even trying.
Thank you so much, Thomas. This is going to conclude our press conference. I want to thank all the members of Congress, higher ed organization, DIF, and particularly Congresswoman Presley for making this press conference